Ladies and gentlemen, when you're trying to build better relationships, one of the most important things you can do is learn to recognize the signs of bad people. It's easy to get caught up in surface level interactions, but over time, the toxic behavior of others can have a profound impact on your well-being and the relationships you build. Recognizing these signs early on. Manipulative behavior is often one of the most subtle yet dangerous signs of bad people. It's not always about overt control. Often it's about subtle manipulation that can slowly wear you down over time. Bad people tend to manipulate those around them to achieve personal goals, usually at the expense of others. One of the key traits of a manipulator is their ability to make you feel guilty or responsible for their needs, emotions, or problems. They may use charm to pull you in and make you feel that you are the one in control, when in reality, they are directing the situation to suit their purposes. Manipulation isn't just about getting people to do what they want, it's about how they go about it. A manipulator knows exactly how to push your buttons, whether it's through guilt tripping, emotional blackmail, or presenting themselves as the victim. The strategy may seem harmless at first, perhaps they make an innocent suggestion, or they appear vulnerable and need help, but over time, this behavior becomes a tool they use to gain control. They rarely ask for help outright. Instead, they create situations where you feel compelled to offer assistance, often without realizing that your efforts are being exploited. One of the most insidious forms of manipulation is the double bind technique, where a person puts you in a position where you can't win no matter how you respond. They may say something like, "If you really cared about me, you would do this for me," which creates an impossible choice. If you say yes, they've manipulated you into doing something against your better judgment. If you say no, they will label you as uncaring or selfish. This tactic works because it leverages your emotions, your sense of kindness, empathy, or responsibility. It plays on the human tendency to want to be liked and to avoid conflict, which manipulative people exploit to maintain control. Manipulators often exploit others' weaknesses or vulnerabilities to gain an advantage. They know who to target and how to present themselves in a way that makes it difficult for you to say no. They may use kindness or affection at the right moments, or provide you with just enough support to make you feel obligated to return the favor. The manipulative person can be charming, charismatic, and make you feel special, but all of it is designed to create a sense of dependence. They want you to believe that you need them or that you are somehow responsible for their happiness or success, even if that is not true. In more extreme cases, manipulative people may gaslight you. Gaslighting is a psychological tactic where the manipulator distorts reality in such a way that you begin to doubt your own perceptions and memory. They might twist facts, deny things they said, or tell you that you are overreacting or being too sensitive. This tactic is particularly dangerous because it erodes your sense of self-worth and makes you more reliant on their version of events. Over time, you start second-guessing yourself and questioning your judgments, which gives the manipulator even more power over you. Manipulative individuals are experts at creating situations where they can control the narrative. They often shift the blame when something goes wrong, making it look like they were the victim or that someone else was at fault. This constant deflection ensures that the manipulator never takes responsibility for their actions. Instead, they portray themselves as the one being wronged, even though they are the ones causing the harm. This cycle of guilt and blame can be incredibly confusing and draining, as it leaves you constantly trying to figure out who is really at fault. Another key characteristic of manipulators is that they frequently play on your emotions to make you feel like you owe them something. They might use emotional blackmail, making you feel responsible for their happiness, well-being, or success. In this way, they create a false sense of obligation in you, leading you to believe that your actions are driven by loyalty, care, or love, when in reality, you are simply being manipulated into doing something that serves their interests. Manipulation can also extend to creating competition or insecurity in others. Bad people often pit people against each other in subtle ways to maintain control. They might make subtle comments that make you feel inferior to someone else or create conflict where none existed. This serves to divide and conquer, making you more reliant on them for validation or approval. Recognizing manipulation requires a sharp awareness of your own feelings and responses. Manipulative people will often make you feel uncomfortable, guilty, or confused, but they do so in ways that are difficult to pinpoint. The key is to trust your instincts. If you feel as though you are constantly giving more than you are receiving, or if you feel emotionally drained after interacting with someone, this could be a sign that manipulation is at play. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with a person. Do you feel empowered, or do you feel small, anxious, or uncertain? If it's the latter, it's time to reassess the dynamics of the relationship. Manipulative behavior, though sometimes hard to detect, is ultimately a tactic used to control and exploit others. The best way to protect yourself is to be aware of the subtle signs, trust your gut feelings, and maintain strong personal boundaries. When you recognize manipulation, you can choose not to engage in it or to distance yourself from it, ultimately regaining your power and agency. Dishonesty is one of the most prominent signs of a bad person. At its core, dishonesty is not just about lying, but about an intentional misrepresentation of truth to serve personal interests. People who engage in dishonesty, even when they don't necessarily have to, are usually doing so to maintain control over a situation or to avoid facing the consequences of their actions. A bad person who is consistently dishonest may deceive you with small lies, elaborate fabrications, or outright concealment of important facts. The habit of dishonesty is particularly dangerous because it erodes trust, the foundation of any meaningful relationship. Over time, this dishonesty can become so ingrained in their behavior that they lie as naturally as they breathe, without any consideration for the truth or the impact their lies have on others. One of the most telling signs of a dishonest person is how they twist the facts to fit their narrative. They may stretch the truth to make themselves look better, or to deflect attention from their wrongdoings. They could exaggerate their successes, hide their failures, or selectively present information to shape how others perceive them. This constant distortion creates a false reality that can be difficult to navigate. As their web of lies grows, they become more adept at manipulating details and shifting the story to suit their needs, making it hard to catch them in the act. This type of dishonesty is not just about the present moment. It can have long-lasting effects as they create a version of reality that others believe to be true, which then impacts decisions, relationships, and outcomes. Dishonest individuals also tend to lie about trivial matters, not just when it's essential to their goals. In many cases, they may lie about small, inconsequential details, such as what time they arrived, who they were with, or even their own emotions. These small lies may seem insignificant at first, but when they become a pattern, they reveal a deeper issue. A person who lies about trivial things is often someone who feels the need to create an illusion of perfection or control, even in situations where honesty would not cause any harm. These repeated small lies gradually diminish trust because they suggest that the person is willing to deceive others for no reason at all. As their web of deceit grows, it becomes increasingly difficult to discern when they are being truthful and when they are not. Another hallmark of dishonesty is the ability to deceive others without remorse or guilt. A bad person who engages in dishonest behavior often doesn't feel bad about lying. In fact, they may even justify their actions, rationalizing that the end justifies the means or that their lies are harmless. This lack of guilt or remorse is what sets them apart from people who may occasionally lie but are uncomfortable doing so. For a dishonest person, lying is a strategy to get ahead, avoid confrontation, or manipulate the situation in their favor. They are not concerned with the damage they cause, as their primary focus is on themselves and what they stand to gain from the deception. This cold detachment from the truth can make their behavior all the more dangerous, as they may have no hesitation in continuing their dishonesty, no matter the consequences for those around them. A dishonest person is also highly skilled in deflection. When confronted about their lies or behavior, they often divert the conversation, shift the blame, or change the topic entirely. Rather than owning up to their actions, they project guilt onto others, making the focus shift away from their own dishonesty. This technique not only protects them from accountability, but also makes others feel as though they are the ones at fault. They may claim that they lied for a good reason, that it wasn't a big deal, or that the truth would have caused more harm than good. These excuses are designed to manipulate your perception of the situation, making you question your own judgment and potentially doubting the validity of your concerns. This form of deflection is a key tool for dishonest people, as it keeps the focus off them and prevents any real confrontation or resolution. Dishonesty often goes hand in hand with a lack of transparency. A person who hides information or deliberately keeps others in the dark is also engaging in dishonesty, even if they are not overtly lying. They may withhold important details, keep secrets, or leave out key facts to maintain control of a situation. This lack of transparency undermines trust and creates an environment where others feel uncertain or suspicious. Over time, this lack of openness breeds mistrust, and those who are consistently dishonest will find it harder and harder to maintain the illusion of integrity. People will start to question their actions and motives, and their credibility will begin to erode. In relationships, dishonesty can be particularly damaging because it creates a cycle of doubt and insecurity. When trust is broken through consistent dishonesty, it becomes difficult to rebuild. The constant questioning of what is true and what is fabricated takes an emotional toll, leaving the person on the receiving end feeling vulnerable and betrayed. Even when the truth is eventually revealed, the damage done by the dishonesty may be irreversible. Trust, once broken, can take years to restore, and in some cases it may never fully recover. The emotional cost of dealing with a dishonest person can be far more devastating than the lies themselves. Ultimately, dishonesty is a way for bad people to manipulate others, avoid responsibility, and maintain control. The lies they tell, whether small or large, are always designed to serve their interests, often at the expense of others. The inability to accept responsibility for their actions or face the consequences of their lies is what sets them apart from those who are willing to confront the truth. It's important to recognize this behavior early on, as dishonesty can erode relationships, damage trust, and leave lasting emotional scars. The more you expose yourself to dishonesty, the more you risk being manipulated and deceived, which is why it's crucial to identify this sign and take appropriate action to protect yourself from its effects. A lack of empathy is one of the most striking characteristics of a bad person. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they are experiencing. It is a fundamental aspect of healthy relationships and emotional connections. When someone lacks empathy, they are often indifferent to the emotions or well-being of others. This absence of care and concern makes them incapable of offering the kind of support, understanding, and kindness that would normally be expected in human interactions. Instead, they may act in ways that are cold, dismissive, or even cruel, without any real awareness or remorse for the impact they have on those around them. The lack of empathy is particularly dangerous in interpersonal relationships because it means that the individual is not capable of understanding how their actions affect others and might engage in hurtful behavior without recognizing or caring about the emotional toll it takes on people. This could manifest in several forms, from ignoring someone's feelings to outright dismissing their concerns or struggles. A person with no empathy might make insensitive comments, belittle others for their emotions, or act as if someone's pain is unimportant. In extreme cases, they may go so far as to mock or ridicule others for their vulnerability, making the person feel ashamed or embarrassed for feeling what they do. Empathy is what allows people to connect on a deeper level, to build trust, and to offer support when it is most needed. Without it, relationships become shallow and one-sided. Someone who lacks empathy will often turn the focus of the conversation or interaction back to themselves, making the situation about their needs and desires rather than the other person's emotions. They may listen only as much as is necessary to gather information or take advantage of the situation, but will never truly engage in the other person's emotional experience. For example, if you are going through a tough time, a person with no empathy might offer a response that feels hollow or dismissive, such as, "It could be worse," or "Just get over it." Rather than offering comfort, their response minimizes your feelings and leaves you feeling isolated and unheard. In addition to dismissing or belittling others' emotions, people who lack empathy may fail to recognize when someone else is in pain or distress. They might walk past someone in need without offering help, or act oblivious to the signs of emotional suffering in those around them. This lack of emotional awareness can create a toxic environment, as others may feel unsupported, invisible, or unimportant. The inability to read social cues or recognize when others are upset is a key marker of a person who is not only disconnected from others, but also indifferent to their struggles. A lack of empathy also leads to selfishness and self-centeredness. When someone cannot understand or care about how their actions affect others, they are more likely to prioritize their own needs and desires over those of others. This might show up as an inability to compromise, a lack of consideration for others' feelings, or an unwillingness to give in relationships. In professional or personal settings, a person without empathy may disregard the needs of their colleagues, friends, or family members in order to achieve their own goals. They might take credit for others' work, make decisions without consulting anyone else, or expect others to cater to their desires without offering anything in return. One of the more dangerous aspects of a lack of empathy is its potential to breed toxic behavior that spreads to others. When someone in a group, whether a family, team, or social circle, consistently exhibits a lack of empathy, it can influence those around them. People who are regularly exposed to such behavior may begin to normalize it or adopt similar attitudes. They might become desensitized to the suffering of others, or even become more self-centered themselves. This creates a ripple effect where a lack of empathy not only harms the individual, but also impacts the wider community, leading to a breakdown in trust, respect, and cooperation. Furthermore, people who lack empathy often have difficulty forming meaningful, lasting relationships. Empathy is what allows people to connect, share experiences, and offer each other emotional support. Without it, relationships become transactional, based on what each person can get out of the other, rather than the emotional connection that sustains deep, genuine bonds. A person who is unable to empathize with others might appear cold, distant, or uninterested in developing close relationships. They might prioritize their own comfort and needs over the emotional connection with those around them, which can leave others feeling neglected and unimportant. This emotional distance often extends to the way bad people treat others in moments of vulnerability. They may be quick to criticize, judge, or take advantage of someone when they are at their lowest. When a person shows their vulnerability, they are often looking for understanding, comfort, or reassurance. A person without empathy might exploit this moment of weakness, using it as an opportunity to criticize, belittle, or manipulate the individual further. They fail to see vulnerability as an opportunity to offer care and support, instead choosing to undermine the person's sense of self-worth and making them feel small or insignificant. Empathy is also key to resolving conflicts and maintaining healthy communication. Without empathy, individuals struggle to see things from the other person's perspective, which makes it difficult to find common ground or compromise. Instead, conflicts escalate because each party is focused on their own point of view, unable or unwilling to consider the feelings and needs of the other. This inability to engage in empathetic dialogue often leads to misunderstandings, resentment, and further emotional harm. Ultimately, a lack of empathy makes it impossible for people to engage in meaningful, supportive, and healthy relationships. When someone is emotionally disconnected and unable to understand or care about the emotions of others, they create a toxic environment where people feel unsupported, misunderstood, and even invisible. Recognizing this lack of empathy is crucial in protecting yourself from relationships that are harmful or draining. People who cannot empathize with others often lead lives driven by self-interest without regard for the emotional well-being of those around them. This emotional disconnect is a clear sign of a bad person and a behavior that should never be ignored. Self-centeredness is a hallmark trait of bad people. It refers to a person's constant focus on their own desires, needs, and interests, often to the exclusion of others. A self-centered individual tends to view the world primarily through the lens of how it affects them, making it difficult for them to engage in meaningful or reciprocal relationships. Everything revolves around their personal preferences and ambitions, and they often fail to recognize or care about the impact their actions have on others. This behavior manifests in many ways, from constant attention-seeking to the inability to empathize with other people's struggles. A self-centered person is often driven by the need to fulfill their own desires, sometimes at the expense of others' feelings or well-being. One of the most obvious signs of self-centeredness is the inability to consider others' perspectives. A person who is self-centered typically sees things only from their own point of view and lacks the capacity or desire to understand how their actions might affect those around them. This can be seen in how they approach conversations. Instead of engaging in a back-and-forth discussion, they dominate the conversation, always steering it back to their own experiences or concerns. Even when someone else is sharing something important or personal, the self-centered person is often only half listening, waiting for their turn to talk. This behavior signals a disregard for the other person's need for acknowledgement or validation. The self-centered individual will often interrupt, dismiss others' opinions, or offer solutions without truly understanding the problem at hand. Another key feature of self-centeredness is the lack of balance in relationships. These individuals tend to take more than they give, and their relationships often feel one-sided. They expect others to cater to their needs, whether it's emotional support, material resources, or time, but they rarely offer anything in return. When you are dealing with a self-centered person, you may find yourself constantly making compromises and sacrifices for their sake, while they do little to support you. They may take credit for shared achievements, but never acknowledge your contributions. They may expect you to adjust to their schedule and priorities, yet show no interest in meeting you halfway. This imbalance can be exhausting and demoralizing, as the self-centered person views the relationship primarily as a means to fulfill their own desires rather than as a mutually supportive dynamic. Self-centered individuals also struggle to share the spotlight, whether in social, professional, or personal situations. They often feel threatened by others' success or attention. They may make passive-aggressive comments or undermine others to maintain the focus on themselves. In group settings, they are likely to dominate the conversation, steering it towards their own achievements and experiences, no matter the relevance. If someone else is receiving praise or attention, the self-centered individual might downplay the other person's accomplishments, subtly suggesting that they are not as impressive or important. This insecurity is rooted in a need for constant validation and recognition, as they thrive on being the center of attention. Moreover, self-centered individuals have a tendency to manipulate situations for their own gain. They may feign interest in something that doesn't matter to them simply because it will provide them with an opportunity to take advantage of a situation. For example, they might pretend to be supportive of a friend's goals or needs, only to later use that information as leverage to get something for themselves. This kind of manipulation is often subtle, but it reveals a deep level of self-interest. The self-centered person may act as though they are selfless or generous, but their actions are often driven by the hope of receiving something in return. This dynamic creates a transactional relationship where gestures of kindness are rarely without strings attached. This intense focus on the self also leads to a lack of accountability. A self-centered person often refuses to acknowledge their mistakes or shortcomings because doing so would mean admitting that their actions have consequences for others. Instead, they deflect blame or make excuses, turning the focus back to themselves. They may argue that their actions were justified or that they were simply misunderstood, even when it's clear that their behavior was hurtful or inconsiderate. This refusal to take responsibility for their actions perpetuates a cycle of self-centeredness, as they never truly confront the impact they have on others. The inability to take responsibility is especially damaging in relationships where accountability and mutual respect are key components of trust and harmony. In personal relationships, self-centeredness often leads to a sense of isolation. The self-centered individual may surround themselves with people who fulfill their needs, but they rarely form deep, meaningful connections. Friendships and romantic relationships become superficial as the focus is always on what the other person can provide for them rather than on mutual support, care, and understanding. Over time, people may begin to distance themselves from the self-centered individual because the relationship feels draining or unfulfilling. It's exhausting to constantly give without receiving anything in return, and eventually others will recognize that the relationship is one-sided. Despite this, the self-centered person may remain unaware or indifferent to the growing distance, as their focus remains entirely on their own needs and desires. And another sign of self-centeredness is the inability to adapt or compromise. A self-centered person typically refuses to alter their behavior or expectations to accommodate the needs of others. They may be rigid in their views, unwilling to listen to alternative perspectives or adjust their plans for the sake of others. If something doesn't go according to their wishes, they may become frustrated, impatient, or resentful, feeling that the situation is unfair or that others are to blame. This unwillingness to compromise makes collaboration or cooperation difficult, as the self-centered person believes their way is always the best and refuses to consider other options. In work environments, self-centeredness can manifest as a lack of teamwork. A self-centered employer or leader may hoard credit for group accomplishments, refuse to share important information, or undermine others in order to make themselves look better. They might focus solely on their own advancement, disregarding the success or well-being of their colleagues. This behavior not only damages professional relationships, but can also create a toxic work environment where cooperation and mutual respect are stifled. A self-centered person's lack of regard for others' needs or contributions can significantly hinder team dynamics and overall productivity. Ultimately, self-centeredness is a trait that reflects a deep-seated focus on one's own desires and needs, often to the exclusion of others. It can lead to a lack of empathy, poor communication, and strained relationships, making it difficult for people to form genuine connections. This self-absorption often manifests in an inability to compromise, a refusal to take responsibility for one's actions, and a tendency to manipulate situations for personal gain. It's a behavior that creates a one-sided dynamic where the self-centered person sees others only in terms of how they can serve their interests. Over time, this trait alienates others and creates an environment where trust, mutual support, and respect are nearly impossible to maintain. Bad people often exhibit patterns of manipulation and deceit, using tactics to control others, gain power, or achieve their goals at the expense of others' well-being. Manipulation is the subtle art of influencing someone's thoughts, behaviors, or emotions without them being fully aware of it, often for personal gain. Deceit, on the other hand, involves misleading or lying to others to maintain control or avoid accountability. And when combined, these two traits create a toxic and harmful environment where trust is eroded, relationships are undermined, and people are left feeling betrayed or used. A person who manipulates and deceives often does so under the guise of caring or being helpful, making it difficult for others to spot the red flags until it's too late. Manipulative people are skilled at understanding what others want or need and then using that knowledge to their advantage. They may act as though they care deeply about your problems, only to later use that information to pressure you into doing something for them. For instance, they might play on your emotions by creating a sense of guilt, making you feel responsible for their well-being or happiness. They will often appeal to your sense of compassion or duty, pushing you to make sacrifices that benefit them. This manipulation can be especially effective because it often preys on the vulnerable, those who are empathetic, kind-hearted, or emotionally invested in the relationship. The manipulator makes it seem as if their demands are reasonable or even necessary, when in reality they are only looking to serve their own interests. Deceit is another hallmark of bad people, and it often goes hand in hand with manipulation. Deceivers will lie, mislead, or hide the truth to gain something they want. They may fabricate stories, twist facts, or present false versions of events to maintain a favorable image or to cover up their wrongdoings. Deceitful individuals may tell half-truths or manipulate the narrative to make themselves look better or avoid consequences. In extreme cases, they may even create elaborate webs of lies that span months or years, making it difficult for others to untangle the truth. This constant deception creates an environment where nothing feels certain and trust becomes increasingly fragile. Those on the receiving end of such deceit often feel disoriented and confused, unable to rely on what they're told or trust the intentions of the manipulator. One of the most insidious aspects of manipulation and deceit is that it often operates in the background unnoticed until the damage is already done. Manipulators are not always overt in their actions. They may disguise their behavior as harmless or even beneficial. For example, a manipulative person might claim to be offering advice, but in reality, they are trying to control your decisions by steering you toward their preferred outcome. They may use flattery or affection to build rapport, only to later use that bond to exploit you. Deceivers, too, tend to be subtle in their approach. They may create situations where the truth is difficult to verify, or they may shift the blame to others when their lies are exposed. The result is that those being manipulated and deceived often find themselves questioning their own perceptions or abilities, feeling as though they are at fault for trusting the wrong person. Bad people who manipulate and deceive are also typically experts at avoiding responsibility for their actions. When confronted with the consequences of their behavior, they will often deflect, deny, or minimize their wrongdoing. They may point fingers at others, blaming them for the situation or suggesting that the issue was blown out of proportion. They may even present themselves as the victim, using sympathy to manipulate others into taking their side. And ultimately, they're responsible for almost all the harm that they cause to human beings. This refusal to take accountability is a key component of their deceitful nature, as they are unwilling to face the reality of their actions and the harm they have caused. This tactic not only protects them from consequences, but also shifts the burden onto those who are trying to confront the truth. The consequences of manipulation and deceit extend beyond just the individual being targeted. They can have a ripple effect on the people around them. Trust is a fragile thing, and once it is broken, it can be incredibly difficult to rebuild. A person who has been manipulated or deceived may start to question their own judgment, become more guarded, and lose faith in others. In a group setting, manipulation and deceit can cause divisions, create conflicts, and foster a toxic atmosphere of distrust. When one person is found to be manipulating or deceiving others, it can lead to feelings of betrayal, resentment, and frustration among those who are affected. The result is often a fractured environment where people are hesitant to rely on each other, making collaboration and cooperation. Manipulative and deceitful individuals also tend to thrive in environments where power dynamics are skewed or where people are less likely to question authority. In workplaces or social situations where there is a clear hierarchy or where people feel vulnerable, manipulative individuals can exploit these conditions to gain an advantage. They may use their position or influence to control others, suppress dissent, and manipulate outcomes in their favor. closer. They might act charming and charismatic in public, but are quick to undermine others in private, seeking to discredit or diminish those who pose a threat to their control. This creates a toxic work or social culture where power is abused and the manipulator is allowed to continue their deceitful behavior unchecked. What makes manipulation and deceit particularly dangerous is the emotional toll they take on the person being targeted. Unlike more direct forms of harm, such as physical abuse or verbal attacks, manipulation and deceit often leave people questioning themselves and their own worth. The constant undermining of one's decisions, emotions, and perceptions can lead to feelings of self-doubt, confusion, and a loss of confidence. The manipulator's ability to make the victim feel responsible for the situation can trap them in a cycle of guilt and self-blame, making it harder to break free from the manipulative relationship. The long-term effects of manipulation and deceit can also extend to the mental and emotional health of the victim. Chronic exposure to deceit can lead to anxiety, depression, and a general sense of distrust in others. People who have been manipulated or deceived may struggle to form new relationships, as they may fear being taken advantage of again. And they might also experience difficulty setting healthy boundaries or asserting themselves, as the manipulative person has conditioned them to doubt their own judgment and needs. Over time, the emotional scars of manipulation and deceit can leave a person feeling disconnected, isolated, and emotionally exhausted. In relationships, manipulation and deceit can destroy the foundation of trust and respect. They create a cycle of dishonesty and control that undermines the possibility of genuine connection. As the manipulator continues to deceive and control, the victim may feel increasingly trapped, unable to break free from the emotional hold that the manipulator has on them. The relationship becomes toxic, with each party playing a role in maintaining the unhealthy dynamic. The victim may feel as though they are constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of what is real and what is fabricated, while the manipulator continues to exploit their vulnerability for personal gain. In conclusion, bad people often display a range of harmful traits that can significantly disrupt the lives of those around them. From manipulation and deceit to a lack of empathy and self-centeredness, these behaviors are rooted in a deep disregard for others and a relentless focus on their own desires and needs. The impact of such individuals is not only immediate, but can also leave long-lasting emotional, mental, and relational scars on those they target. Identifying the signs of bad people, such as a tendency to control, lie, or undermine others, is crucial for protecting oneself from their harmful influence. By recognizing these traits early, individuals can set boundaries, distance themselves from toxic relationships, and prevent further damage. Ultimately, understanding the behaviors of bad people empowers individuals to make more informed choices about the relationships they cultivate, ensuring they surround themselves with people who contribute positively to their lives and well-being.